real true crime case of a killer clown. On the morning of May 26, 1990, Marlene Morin had a visitor at her door. When she opened her door, standing in front of her was a clown holding flowers and balloons. Before Marlene even knew what was happening, the clown took out a revolver and shot her in the face. Since it's now October, you guys have been asking me to cover the most terrifying true crime cases I know, and truly, what is scarier than a real killer clown? Marlene's son and some of his friends were over for breakfast, and they could see everything that happened. They saw the clown just turn around and walk slowly, silently back to the car that they came in, get in the car, and just drive away like nothing happened. Marlene was rushed to the hospital, but sadly passed away 2 days later from her injuries. When a woman is killed, the first person that investigators look at is the husband. Marlene and Mike Warren owned multiple properties and businesses together, but they were also having severe marital problems. Marlene suspected that her husband Mike had been having an affair, and that she was even afraid for her life. She told multiple people before she passed away that if something happened to her, her husband was the one that did it. But her husband had an airtight alibi. It could not have been him that came to her house dressed like a clown and had shot her. Could he have hired someone? And what about the woman that he was having this rumored affair with? That woman was Sheila Keene. Sheila was also married actually to a member of the KKK. And it was pretty well known knowledge that Sheila and Michael were having an affair, that they were sleeping together, although they always denied it. They claimed that they were just friends. But even Sheila's own neighbors thought that Michael was her husband instead of her actual KKK husband because of how often Michael was over at her house. But just because two people may or may not be having an affair is not enough to charge someone with murder. Well, luckily, the investigators started to gather a lot of convincing evidence. They were able to track down the costume shop where the clown costume had been purchased. The owners of the costume shop said that 2 days before Marlene was killed, a woman with dark brown hair and big brown eyes came after closing to the shop, frantically saying that she needed to get in because she needed to get a clown costume. This would be, typical behavior if it was the day before Halloween, but this was in the middle of spring. And the owners of that costume shop were able to identify Sheila as that woman from a photo lineup. And the same description of the same woman, long brown hair, big brown eyes, was seen at the Publix grocery store right near Marlene's house the day that she passed away, purchasing those flowers and balloons that the clown was holding. 4 days after Marlene was killed, the same car that the clown was seen driving was found abandoned in a parking lot 8 miles away. In the backseat of the car was a Publix grocery store bag, so things are lining up, and inside of the bag were orange wig fibers, likely from the orange clown wig. And that same car had actually been reported stolen. It was from a used car shop. A used car shop that Marlene's husband Michael was the owner of, so things are not looking good. And speaking of Marlene's husband Michael, investigators do not trust this man. They believe that Michael and his mistress Sheila were the ones that killed Marlene, so they start investigating every single aspect of Michael's life. They start investigating his businesses. Remember, him and Marlene owned a lot of businesses together, and they actually found out that Michael had been committing a lot of fraud through his businesses. They actually charged him with 43 counts of fraud and racketeering, and he went to prison for 3 years because of this. After his release, him and Sheila both just kind of disappeared. They both left the area and no one knew where they went. And that's all that the investigators had for a really, really long time. This case went unsolved for years and years. Luckily, the investigators could not let this case go. Even independent journalists were unable to let this case go. They demanded that Marlene's case did not go unsolved. And what they were able to find next was shocking. Turns out, 12 years after Marlene was killed, her husband Michael married Sheila in a secret wedding. Now remember, Michael always denied having an affair with Sheila. Sheila, who was the prime suspect in his wife's murder. He married the prime suspect in his wife's murder 12 years later in a secret wedding. It's like super suspicious. It had been years since Marlene had been killed, and investigators and independent journalists were able to work together and finally track down Michael and Sheila. Turns out, after being married in secret for a little bit, the two of them actually moved states together. They opened a restaurant together. Sheila had dyed her hair suspiciously the same color as Marlene's hair, looking like her husband's dead wife. Kind of weird. Sheila was also going by a new name, and everyone that knew Sheila and Michael in this new area that went to their restaurant all the time had no idea that the two of them had ever been married before. They did not know that Michael had a dead wife. They knew nothing about any of this. This is when we found out that the investigators were actually holding on to a really, really big piece of evidence. They had DNA that was left in that car that the clown had drove that was abandoned in that parking lot. But DNA testing was not the same in the 90s that it was now. But the investigators kept onto it just in case DNA testing ever got better. So they start retesting all of their old DNA, and that's when they finally linked Sheila's DNA to the DNA that they found in the car. It had been 27 years since Marlene had been killed, and Sheila was finally arrested for murdering her on September 26, 2017. And I bet for those nearly 3 decades, Sheila believed that she had gone away with it. They actually found a photo that was taken years after Marlene was killed of Sheila at a Halloween party, and guess what she dressed up as? She dressed up as a clown. Tell me that's not the sickest, most evil thing you've ever heard of. And I bet in her mind, she thought it was funny, dressing up like a clown for Halloween a few years after killing Marlene while dressed up as a clown. Originally, the prosecution was going for the death penalty in the trial of Sheila Keene, but after the trial was postponed so many times during the 2020 pandemic, they ended up offering her a plea deal, and sadly she did take the plea deal, and it was if she pled guilty to killing Marlene that they would only give her 12 years in prison, and she's expected to be released next year in 2025. Apparently, there was never enough evidence to charge Michael Warren in the murder of his wife. As of right now, only Sheila has ever been charged, which really upsets me because I feel like we had enough evidence to charge Sheila. So if we were going to offer her a plea deal, it would have been to incriminate Michael. But definitely let me know your thoughts on that. I doubt I'm not the only person that also believes that Michael is guilty, and this was a conspiracy that he came up with his mistress Sheila to